Hello, and how are you doing today? My name is Andrew, and today's video is about water. Well, not exactly about water. However, many scientists think that water is necessary for the formation of life. Now, today's video is actually about Mars. And there's so much water on Mars that if you were to melt all of the water underneath the surface of Mars and at the polar ice caps, that you would have enough water to cover the entire planet 35 meters deep. Now, if someone were to come up to you and task you with sending people to Mars, I am going to show you how to do it. Now that we've been tasked with sending people to Mars, the first step in accomplishing this is building a rocket capable of going there. Before building the rocket, we should first consider which materials to use in order to construct it. These materials need to be strong, have low electrical conductivity, and corrosion resistant. Good materials are aluminum, stainless steel, and carbon composites. Now that we've decided what materials to use for our rocket, now we can begin construction. And we should make the rocket big. Like really big. In fact, there is no limitation on how big to build the rocket. The bigger the better, as long as our materials can withstand it. A rocket needs to be so big in order to carry a useful payload to Mars. Since a rocket needs to be about 85 to 90% fuel, with the rest of the 10 to 15% being the structure of the rocket, cargo, and people, we don't really have much room for anything except for fuel. Finally, we should consider what kind of engines to put on a rocket. There's two key metrics that we use in order to determine the effectiveness of a rocket engine, and that's total thrust and specific impulse. Specific impulse is just a measure of the exhaust velocity of the engine and therefore the efficiency of it. Just make those numbers as high as possible and you'll be good to go. Now that we've built the rocket, we can move on to step number 2. And in step number 2, we can hope that the old adage of build it and they will come comes true. Because we need to find people willing to take the journey. Maybe that person might just be you. It will be a dangerous journey traveling to Mars. However, with the right preparation, we can make it become successful. Now let's talk about the right kind of people to make this journey. We can use information from NASA to help us out with this. For starters, in the past, NASA astronauts have ranged anywhere from the age of 25 years old to John Glenn at 77 years old. Overall physical health will be important on a journey to Mars because healthcare options will be limited compared to what they would be on Earth. Generally speaking, NASA chooses astronauts who don't have any diagnosed diseases or illnesses. In addition, astronauts generally have a baseline level of fitness. And finally, it will be important that our astronauts have strong mental health. A NASA psychologist said that the 3 most important traits for long-duration spaceflight missions is strong teamwork, good judgment, and the ability to quickly adapt to changing scenarios. I'm also going to add that an astronaut's willingness to have strong interpersonal relationship with their crewmates is important because arguments and conflicts can be difficult to solve in such a tight, closed space. Now that we've built a rocket, found people to go on the rocket, we can now move on to step number 3. And in step number 3, we're ready to launch. We launch the rocket, we go into low Earth orbit. And then with a little bit of knowledge about orbits, we can shoot our engines at just the right time, at just the right direction, and we can now be on our way to Mars. As our astronauts begin making their way away from Earth and onwards to Mars, we will now need a way to keep our astronauts alive. A productive way of figuring out how to keep our astronauts alive is to look at the things that we have here on Earth and figure out what's most important for our survival. The first thing that our astronauts will need is a source of oxygen to breathe. In addition to having oxygen to breathe, we also need a method of removing harmful gases like carbon dioxide from our spacecraft. After we provide oxygen to our astronauts, they're going to start getting thirsty, so we need a way to provide them with water. In addition to drinking, water can also be used for hygiene and growing food. Food is the next thing on our list. Our astronauts will need to eat. There's a few ways that we can provide food to our astronauts. The first way is to pre-package food on Earth, freeze dry them, ship them up whenever they launch. The second way that we can provide food to our astronauts is by growing it on the spacecraft itself. Since our astronauts will be leaving our atmosphere and magnetosphere, they will be bombarded with about an order of magnitude more radiation than they would be exposed to here on the surface of the Earth. In order to keep our astronauts safe from radiation, we'll need to develop methods in order to block or absorb that radiation. The easiest way is by developing a material that we can place on the outside of the ship which can block and absorb most of that radiation. Now I'll give you a little secret. There's one thing that you can bring aboard your spacecraft that will actually help with all 4 of the problems that we just talked about, and that is water. Water can not only be used for drinking and hygiene, but it can also be used for growing food. And if you were to split up water into its 2 elements, hydrogen and oxygen, you can actually use the hydrogen as rocket fuel, and you can use the oxygen for the air that you breathe. Finally, since water is really rich in hydrogen, it actually makes for a really good shield against radiation. So if you put water on the outside of your spacecraft, it will be very effective. Now that we've built a rocket, found some people to go on the trip, and kept them alive, we can now move on to our last and final step number 4. And that is finding a purpose for them when they land on the planet. Initially, the astronauts' purpose will be to develop shelter, grow food, and find ways to obtain water. Once that's complete, we can then move on to some more activities, like scientific exploration and research. We can then begin answering some of the important questions of life, like are we alone in the universe? Is there life on Mars? Was there life on Mars? And how did Mars form? This is where the fun begins. Well, congratulations. We have now sent people to the surface of Mars. I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.